Let's start. And thank you everybody for joining us after lunch, and hopefully some of our colleagues will join us later. I'm really proud to introduce this panel session that is part of the journey to patient access, journey of cell and gene therapies to patient access that we have taken over these last 2 days. So yesterday we had Lucy talking about the patient experience. Today's EURORDIS. We had regulators, HTA bodies, discussing about their new approach, and apparently their answer to some of questions in terms of access in Europe has been to raise the bar in terms of evidence requirements. We had this morning investors presenting on talking also about the impact of reimbursement, pricing and reimbursement in Europe that has on investment decisions. So I would say we got a broad view across the board, from other panels on other topics. What we want to focus on, and today with this panel, is really look at, I would say the funnel, the last mile of this journey. So we are going to talk about what happens between payers, developers, and we have Americo that is on the top of the chain in Italy, is heading up the department at the Ministry of Health. So it's the #1 payer in Europe and one of the biggest payers across Europe. We have 2 developers. So Dilip on the CAR T side with Autolus, a CAR T company that is launching this year, next year, in the US and in Europe. We have Stefano with a non-for-profit charity based in Italy, Telethon, and you heard a bit about Telethon also in previous panels in the last couple of days. And so Telethon has a product on the market, but a gene therapy on the market, Strimvelis, but they're also launching a gene therapy probably next year, so end of this year, next year. So it'll be interesting to hear from Stefano as well, from the non-for-profit perspective. And last but not least, we have Matt from EURORDIS. So we will have the patient perspective, so rare disease, European organizations that will talk about what they think about access and solutions to get better access. So we are going to focus on payment solutions. We're going to focus on pricing. We're going to focus on cost of goods, or how costly or not is manufacturing these drugs. We know that there is not full agreement necessarily, among our speakers, and that's normal because it's a tough topic. And it's really a crucial moment here in Europe to, for this sector and for patients. So I would say, it's very important, and I would really like you guys to come with your own perspective, very direct, very honest, and let's try to touch upon some tough topics. Okay, so that's my suggestion for this discussion. I stop here with my general intro, and actually before doing that, we'll leave some time at the end for questions from the audience. So prepare your questions. You will have 5 minutes at the end. I'd like to start with introduction so that you can go a bit deeper than what I mentioned. Probably we can start from Stefano.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Paolo, for the kind invitation. Very happy to be here today. Talking about a topic that we never thought till, let's say, 1 year ago would be a topic of interest, of direct interest for Fondazione Telethon. So I'm the head of public affairs at Fondazione Telethon. I've been always looking at this topic a bit as something we need to lobby, we need to work on for the access of patients. Now we are also on the other side. We have a product on the market. So recently I became also market access responsible within Telethon, and I'll be happy to share with you our thoughts about this issue.
Thank you, Stefano. Americo.
At first, thank you very much Paolo for this invitation, for this interesting panel, this occasion. It seems a context in which many things can happen, many things can be learned, so very happy to be here. I'm an academic, and in my second life now, I'm I'm the Director General of the Department of Healthcare Planning for the Italian National Health Service. And actually, I dealt with this issue of ATMPs from different perspectives. As a direct payer, I've been member of the Price Reimbursement Committee of the Italian National Drug Agency in the past, then as support to developers, as a researcher in the economic analysis of the impact of ATMPs. And I think this is a great opportunity for patients and a real challenge also from a financial perspective, if you see from my new perspective as payer. Yeah.
Thank you, Americo, and we'll hear more about this later on. Matt.
So I'm an advocate at heart. So this ATMPs for our community really offer hope, and we have projections of 10 to 20 new therapies coming in each year. That hasn't materialized yet, and what is available and being approved we struggle to access across Europe. So, I'm involved in this discussion and ATMPs representing the community because whilst it's challenging for payers to think about, and I used to be a payer in the UK, I know how to say no 50 ways, but whilst it's challenging for payers, actually it's more challenging for people living with a rare condition which impacts their lives and destroys lives. And so we need to really move forward the discussion to enable access. And I think the managed entry agreements are one component of a wider system which is needed, a more systematic approach which is needed. And I think it's really timely to draw on the expertise here, but also across Europe to see how we can make that step forward to enable more equitable access.
Thank you, Matt. Dilip.
So yeah, look, thanks, Paolo, for inviting me to be a part of this panel. And despite my young looks, I've been in the industry now for 25 plus years. And this is an interesting time for me. Prior to joining Autolus, who, as you know, are a T-cell therapy developer, and as Paolo has mentioned, we're some 9-10 months away from potentially launching our product in the US, and then have recently just been accepted for regulatory approval for assessment in Europe, so that'll be next year. And prior to that, I worked at Kite. So I'm proud to say that I was one of the very first people to work on Yescarta for DLBCL. But what I did want to say was, in my prior life, when I worked at Novartis, back in 2006, at that time, innovative pricing mechanisms were not a thing. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but I think at Novartis, we were one of the first companies to develop an outcomes-based guarantee scheme to get our product at that time, Lucentis in wet AMD through NICE. And Paolo said, well, I need to be controversial. I don't see that the landscape's even changed from 2006 to 2024 in terms of the engagement between manufacturers and developers such as us and payers. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I think through ARM, there's an opportunity to continue to develop. And just before I finish, I wanted to kind of set the panel going and think about the cell and gene therapy market. So today, from the data that I have, the cell therapy market is worth $2.4 billion with around 55,000 patients. In 2028, the prediction is that the market for cell therapy only will be worth $7.1 billion. with a patient group of, serving a patient group of around 350,000 globally. And the gene therapy market today is worth just under 1 billion, 0.9, serving a market of serving a patient pool of around 50. And in 2028, that's predicted to grow to 5.9 billion, serving a market of 300,000. So the point I'm trying to make, which is my last point, is that somehow we need to figure out how we're going to work with payers to get, these products available to patients and have them reimbursed.
Thanks a lot, Dilip. And I'm sure we're going to figure out during this panel in the remaining 49 minutes how to solve this issue. In the meantime, I would like to ask the panelists, and please jump in, first one to go first. We have been, hearing over the last 2 days that, in terms of reimbursement commercially, it's a mixed bag in Europe. But I would like to get your personal and also your organizational organization perspective into this. So are you satisfied about access to ATMPs so far? So we have 19 ATMPs approved in Europe. We had more that were actually currently in the market, more that were approved, and some left the market. So how do you feel about access to ATMPs so far? Who wants to go first?
Well,
Last one.
I mean, I've highlighted that the therapies which are available now, access remains poor across Europe. For ultra-rare conditions, it's really difficult to cross borders to centres like San Raffaele in Milan. There's barriers there between countries which shouldn't be there. We know with rare diseases, European collaboration is an area of added value of the EU project, and we need to really go the next mile of thinking how we work on a European scale for ultra-rare diseases. For us, we're really concerned where we see the high percentage, the percentage of products which have been approved, which are now withdrawn from the market because of commercial use. That's really worrying. On top of that, when you see products which have managed to go over the first valley of death and get a viable asset through to market authorization and it stumbles, why are those assets not being picked up? Why are people not going and seeing how to improve those assets? Because they're viable. They will be viable in the future. They offer hope to lots of people. So it's a really worrying and alarming situation we're in at the moment. And I think there's three key issues. One is the lack of launching of new clinical trials in Europe, the willingness to pay due to the level of uncertainty at market authorization, and the key there is around meaningful clinical outcomes and early dialogue, and the lack of, and the whole debate about sustainability overshadows really strategic discussions around Italy, around France, around how to develop health systems to be ready to plug in new therapies which are coming in. We're losing that momentum now.
If I may, Gemma, what you were saying about cross-border, I think that's really a key issue. At least this is for us, for ultra-rare disease. So Streamvalis is a therapy that we administer to 45 patients since 2000. We average 4 patients per year. Of course, this is very difficult to make a sustainable business model for a company with these numbers, but it's also difficult for a not-for-profit like us. We can't go and negotiate the price in 27 countries when we already know that we go negotiate the price in a country that may never have one single patient. We will not open 27 centers around Europe to treat 4 patients per year, because that's not good for the patient at all. I mean, you don't want to go in a centers where they treat with that therapy 1 patient every 4 or 5 years, right? So you want to concentrate that in one place. But that means that you need to allow patients to move and get treated in that country. And currently, this is not yet the situation in Europe because, according to the existing legislation, if the price is not negotiated in your country, then that therapy is not in your basket of care, so you are not entitled to get access to that therapy. I think that is something we should change, and we should change rather soon than later, because that's really blocking access to this kind of treatment. And I'm talking about, ultra-rare disease. I mentioned the number because I want to make it very clear. We're not talking about SMA. They treated 4,000 patients in like 3-4 years. I'm talking about these diseases. But these diseases are like 85% of rare diseases. So they affect few people, but there are a huge number of diseases, which hopefully will mean a huge number of therapies in the future.
Dilip.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what Matt's saying, and I think he eloquently describes from a payer perspective and then representing patient groups what, some of the challenges are. I think in what I see is that some of the countries have started to recognize that they need to change, and they need to change the framework, and they need to engage. So that's a kind of positive first step. But I still think it needs something at a European level, for policymakers to come together and accept that innovative pricing is reality. It's here, and it's here because of the cost of developing and the cost of manufacturing cell and gene therapies is a real thing. It's not just something that pharma is making up to be able to charge more for their product. Let's be honest, back in the day, in the 90s, maybe that was the case. But today, as a developer, I know what the cost, for Autolus is of manufacturing, of developing and then manufacturing a cell therapy, and gene therapy, even more. So I through a lot of the work that Paolo and I have done in developing the Dolan white paper and so on and so forth, have seen that certainly HTA agencies have started to recognize, even in countries that didn't, in Spain and so on and so forth. But I think somehow we need to work at a European level with policymakers to help them really come to the table. That's what my belief is.
Thanks. We'll get back to these things, but first we want to hear the payer what has to say on this.
I mean, first the payer says that, I agree with my colleagues here that especially for ultra-rare diseases, of course, this is a challenge that should be faced at the European level. And I agree that probably we need to do more to have a complete accessibility to these therapies, because, of course, the cross-border regulation at the moment is not helping, to increase the accessibility. If I take the perspective from, the national point of view, Italy as well as, I can say, France or other countries, if you look at the numbers, at the end of the day, the vast majority of the therapies that's been approved by EMA has been also approved at national level in Italy. Probably the problem is more, the ability of the European system to accommodate and to, have all the new therapies, asking to enter in the European market. This is a different story. But when they are in the European market, if I look at Italy, we have to say that the vast majority of the therapies has been approved. At the moment, this is possible also because the real budget impact generated by these new therapies has been quite small. We have, a special fund that is dedicated to any innovative technology, so not only ATMPs, but also oncological and so on, and is enough to accommodate at the moment now. But if I, the kind of dynamic that we have in face, this is, of course, is the real challenge for the future, is a challenge for the future. I mean, we need to be prepared, and I think this is a different story. But if I can say now, are you satisfied about the access that has been provided to patients? I have to say yes. Of course, the voice of the patient is much, is more important than mine in this perspective, but I think that we were able to look at the single situation, providing the right solution, also in terms of payment schemes. The creativity of the Italian National Drug Agency is now very well known all over the world in the application, in inventing new payment schemes. But with these schemes, we were able to, to face any specific new therapy to be introduced. In the future, I think that we need to look and to invent a different scheme. Probably this can be a matter of a following question.
Thanks a lot. Actually, I have a follow-up question for you, Americo. You mentioned the European system may be more selective. Can you expand a bit on that? Because we had comments about Europe. Potentially Europe could be helpful. So there's not at the moment a European payer or something that looks like an European payer. But probably there are discussions, and we will go through this later on about, especially for ultra-rare diseases. So when you say that the European system has been selective or there has been a barrier, where do you see this? Or do you see this coming from, I don't know, the new JCA approach or other things?
At first I have to say that European Commission has understood the relevance of creating a specific framework for ATMPs. And I refer to the introduction within the HTAR, so the new HTA regulation, the topic of the TMPs on the top of the list. Of course, this regulation now is producing all the different implementation act, and we know that the guidelines regarding the JCA probably at the moment are not really probably fitting with the problem. But since this is a process, and this process should be, I think, little by little also, made more and more sharp. It is something that the coordinating group has very clear in their mind. Of course, the JCA regulations and regulation and guidelines has been designed to accommodate different perspectives, as you know, has been the result of a bit of a negotiation between the different countries, and I can see space for make that regulation better. Because in Europe, as well as in any other part of the world, patients can see the opportunities, and governments need to find the right solution to make accessibility and sustainability, go together.
Thank you very much, Americo, because I think this, what you just said gives us a lot of hope that, some issues that we see happening, in terms of the new regulation and things that we don't really completely understand, can be solved and addressed both at European level, but also at country level, from countries that have the goodwill to grant access to cell and gene therapies. So that would be definitely, something that we want to explore in detail, how then national level with payers, we can find solutions that are going to work, for developers, payers, and patients as well. Back to Matt, 1 second. You said that you were not that happy, and Americo is saying, actually, we are happy here in Italy. You know, we granted access to largest majorities of ATMPs so far. I guess your perspective is pan-European. So are there, in your view, areas in Europe or countries that are struggling or lagging behind for different reasons? Is that your perspective when you mention that should be a pan-European approach? So are you thinking also about countries that usually have less access or less willingness to pay, let's say, for these therapies?
Well, most therapies, there's a lag time in between their availability across Europe. For a lot of therapies for ultra-rare, they're never available across Europe. So we're unhappy about that. Managed entry agreements were seen as a silver bullet. They were there to try and do two things. One, guarantee access, but also safeguard sustainable budgets. How can you drive a car with the handbrake on and pressing the accelerator at the same time? They're not a silver bullet. They have minimal impact on budgets. The Italian experience has just been published, and it's less than 1% payback of the budget through the different. Well, that was what the publication was saying. So I'm interested to whether you see that differently.
The kind of indicator, but no, please go ahead.
I mean, they are being used, these agreements now, which is good. But maybe they shouldn't be trying to do two things at once. We want to. They could be useful to enable access, to give time for collection and incentivizing hospitals to collect data over a 2 to 3 year period to reduce that level of clinical uncertainty. So when it gets approved, then we can then put in proper agreements which are justified. But I think that at the moment the agreements aren't effective. They come with a high cost, high time, and high administration burden, not just for payers, but for industry, for patient groups, patients themselves, and for payers. And we need to think through and consolidate our experience to date. We talk about European collaboration. Let's get the payers together to exchange their experiences and build a common competency about when is a financially based agreement or an outcome-based agreement, and with the level of risk in there is appropriate for what type of products, what type of indications. We need to get that learning quickly to make these agreements more useful, but they're not, for me, they're not the sole tool which we need to rely on, and at the moment they're not enabling access across Europe.
Thank you, Matt. And I don't know, Americo, if you want to respond.
No, just to, of course, the managed entry agreements has been introduced also for financial reasons, but actually, in our experience, in 2005, when we have introduced the managed entry agreements, the primary goal was to increase the level of appropriateness. So the main goal wasn't to create savings, okay? And so I have read that paper, and probably the questions were wrong, because they tried to say, okay, since the system has been introduced to save money, actually there was no money saving. But the issue is that it has been introduced for a different reason, to increase the level of appropriateness for some high-costing technologies. And again, when I think about managed entry agreement to be applied in some areas, probably ATMPs need a different approach because the kind of system that we have applied in 2005 for other drugs, not ATMPs, areas in which the level of inappropriateness could be very high. Okay.
So I just want to come back. So we're in agreement that we're both advocating that managed entry agreements should be used to enable access alone across Europe.
Absolutely.
And not be misinterpreted to protect budgets. Because I think that would be really great clarification, that we all work to the same criteria.
If I may add on that, I think Another crucial point of management agreement is that if you have different management agreements, country by country, that cause an additional burden on the developers. It's an additional cost. You need to collect different data in different countries, which means at the end of the day, the price will be still higher. So, because you should consider that all costs sustained by developers at the end will end up in the price, So the most I spend, the higher will be the price. So if you force developers to have different clinical studies after launch in different countries because you have different outcome-based agreement, that means you're multiplying the cost on developers, which will end up in higher prices. We see from our perspective, our approach, being a not-for-profit, we don't have to pay back investors, we don't have to pay back the research expenditures with selling the drug, but still, because of the very low number of the treated patients, and because of the high cost we still have to face for keeping the product on the market, the price cannot be as low as probably most people will expect. I've read a study from it's very interesting, from the Innovative Genomics Institute. The author is Melinda Kligman from the University of Berkeley, was published last year. And they tried to calculate what could be a fair price based on a cost-based approach, so cost plus. And they said, well, if you have 200 patients, that fair price, which has a very limited return on investment, very limited profit, so I'm not sure it's a sustainable price for a drug developer, but I said it's a fair price, it's 1.5 million per patient. If you have a disease that affects 200 patients in the US. So imagine what that price could be if the disease affects only 20 patients, and if the burden of collecting data post-marketing is increased by the fact we have different agreement per country. So I think that an harmonization at European level would be beneficial also in that sense.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy how this discussion is going. And I would like to ask Dilip, because there were you mentioned management agreements, outcome-based, or you said innovative payment solutions. So just for the help, helping the audience in navigating this, Dilip, I would like you to share the experience from developers, based on the study and report that you mentioned. Where do you see that, kind of common grounds? How do you see the experience from the developer's perspective on those?
Just to level set, I think I could probably sort of count on the fingers of my hand how many managed entry agreements or innovative pricing mechanisms there are currently in the cell and gene therapy space. Very few. There's a few annuities and so on and so forth, but when we did the report, what it showed is that the majority of them are simple discounts. That's the world today. I know kind of Matt mentioned there's a few outcomes guarantee schemes out there and things, but the majority are still simple discounts. Doesn't matter where you go in Europe. The elephant in the room is Germany. Even in Germany, at the point of negotiation, it becomes a volume-based discount. So that's where we are. That's what the report said. That's where we are today. And just to the point around Italy, I was just talking to an Italian payer just a couple of weeks ago. And just to echo what's already been said, they essentially said, look, we're fed up with this scheme because as an administrator, I don't have the time to do this anymore. And so for gene therapies, we don't want it. We don't want we don't want it in Italy because we're fed up with it. So that's the kind of feedback that I heard just speaking face to face. But I think the other thing, and I've kind of touched upon it already, that the report highlighted is that there are some framework changes in Europe. Some of the countries, as I said, are coming to the table and thinking about working with developers and manufacturers to develop some kind of scheme. But as is already been mentioned, the biggest hurdle is that of administration, that of collecting the data, that of transparency. These were all those things that the report said are a huge kind of issue. And let's be frank, payers don't trust manufacturers. and manufacturers are banging their head against a brick wall, as so to speak, in trying to even have a conversation with the payer about, developing some kind of innovative pricing, mechanism. So, yeah, that's the kind of landscape that we're in today. But I just want to kind of echo the point again. In the next 5 years, the train is full. The train is full of cell therapies and gene therapies. Affordability, let's not kid ourselves. Publicly funded healthcare system is an issue, and I think as manufacturers we understand that. We also understand that many of the indications and many of the technologies that we're developing, unfortunately it ends up being a single-arm trial. So to the point, we know at the point of getting regulatory approval and then going to a payer to get reimbursement, we're going with immature data. We get all of that. But I think, really the solution is we kind of need payers to open their hands and kind of invite us into the room for a discussion, because at the moment, that happens few and far between. And it should start, for me, to your point, and that's what one of the things that the report highlighted, right at the start of the journey, not at the end, where you've been through, for example, in old Germany, 12 months, new Germany, 6 months, and you're continually kind of on the fringe trying to negotiate this. Why not start at the start and have this collaboration and discussion rather than wait at the end?
Thanks a lot. Actually, this makes me ask a question to Americo. So do you actually trust developers? And second thing, are you going to welcome Dilip, open hands when he's going to
Paolo,
knock at your door?
We know each other for many years, and I have said ever that this is an ecosystem. The public healthcare systems will survive if industry will survive and will develop. No, I mean, this is the story. So we need to trust each other. There is no other way to collaborate. And I would like to go back to the issue of the innovative pricing schemes and so on. I think that we all agree on a concept that is value-based pricing. Since the value can be measured ex ante, but mainly we are going to measure ex post, it's important to have, some way to pay for the real value. Okay, of course, taking into consideration that there is uncertainty, that the uncertainty is generating risks. The risk should be borne by different, public and private sector, of course. We had a period in which the number of managed entry agreements applied to hundreds of molecules and new drugs has been created an administrative burden. You were mentioning probably this. I think that the answer is not, stop with the managed entry agreements. I think that the answer is how to make them sustainable also from an administrative point of view. And of course, there is a problem that, to manage these agreements, you need data. I think that a solution that is the one that has been chosen in Italy was that mainly the financial burden for collecting data should be from the public side. It's true that also we receive as a National Drug Agency some money from the industry to manage this system, but actually the economic burden is not so high. I understand, on the other hand, a situation in which in different countries you have different payment schemes and the financial burden to collect data is borne by the industry. I agree that this is not working. It's something to be solved. So I think that the idea of the European health data space should go in that direction, and we all know that, probably is not going to the, you know, as fast as we, we were dreaming. But again, if we would like to pay for the value, we need to face this problem and find the right solutions. I mean,
Thanks a lot, Americo.
I just wanted to make one point, Paolo, sorry to jump in. And I know here we're talking about kind of an operational scenario in terms of pricing some of our cell and gene therapies. But on a macro scale, thinking about Europe, a lot's been said over the last couple of days that a lot of focus is now moving out of Europe. And Matt mentioned, you know, the numbers of manufacturers that are pulled out of Europe because they can't secure what they term to be a viable price or secure a viable, you know, reimbursement. This is going to be a huge issue. As I see it, I'm lucky enough to have a global role. I see what's happening in the US. I see what's happening in Europe, and, you know, God forbid, I even see what's happening in the UK. But when you go, you know, what I hear from our members, for example, is when, as a European, affiliate, they go, you know, to their CEO and say, well, hey, come to Europe. The answer is no, because essentially we are, you know, I hear about, you know, how your organization is structured, but the majority of manufacturers are profit-based. And so when you go to your CEO and say, hey, come to Europe, it's difficult in the current circumstances. And I think we need to figure it out, because otherwise that, you know, is going to get worse and worse. And I think it's going to be a bleak picture for Europe in terms of then getting access to some of these innovative drugs, which essentially are driven towards either, you know, long-term, to offer a long-term response or a cure. That's the value. And our patients in Europe and the UK, they're just not going to get them, simply because we can't put a business case together, you know, to convince people to come to Europe.
And when you say, you know, put the business case together and convince your CEO, where is the pain point, which are the major pain point on your side?
Pricing, of course, and profit.
In terms of, so pricing potential, but also, you know, is something like related to the HTA part of the payment models, or altogether?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about the JCA. That's been talked about already, but
yeah,
you know, the methodology does not lend itself to a positive, you know, let's put ourselves forward. JCA, the results become public. It just doesn't, you know, the single-arm trial is ripped to shreds, essentially. So the impact of that globally is huge. It's not just for Europe. You know, that report will be published in the US, in, you know, other global regions. So it's a big problem.
Thank you. Matt?
So I think we need to bring in a level of stability for new products which are coming to the market in Europe, for manufacturers' perspective, but also from the patients' community's perspective, and for hospitals as well, who need time to develop services. We've advocated for the development of a European fund. You know, when I started at EURORDIS 10 years ago, I said, why are we not doing a European fund around high-cost, innovative therapies? And we weren't ready yet. But, you know, 10 years on, we are now seeing collaborations for joint clinical assessment. You know, we are now becoming ready for that, and we need to be pushing that. So we're calling for, and we still call for, a European fund to be put in place as a minimum to support that data collection, the infrastructure which is needed to incentivize hospitals to take off the pressure on them. But the European and Social Committee have also been pushing for a solidarity fund for innovative therapies as well. So we're really open around what type of fund should be available to European level, but we need that stability to bridge from market authorization through to mainstreaming these therapies into clinical services where we can gain real-world experience and the products are available. And then we can talk about, you know, what type of agreements are put in place. If we have a fund which provides that 2 to 3 year period of stability, It enables countries to sort themselves out around, oh, let's only have this in 3 countries. Let's build cross-border agreements in place. It enables countries to have those discussions themselves.
That, what you're mentioning, would be a model for access to rare or ultra-rare disease therapies at European level, right? So with a European fund, a scheme for paying, across Europe, and centers, treatment centers, probably a few treatment centers across Europe, as also Stefano was mentioning. And then you're saying the pricing approach would be something that we look at afterwards, or would you see the fund like covering the whole thing? How do you figure this?
We're open for it to cover everything, to be honest.
Yeah.
The Solidarity Fund would be great on this, especially for ultra-rare indications. We can collect the data in that period of time to reduce clinical uncertainty, which then gives greater clarity at price reimbursement a bit further down the road. So I think we need to start pushing for that discussion now that we're seeing collaborations on joint assessment, clinical assessment, which is coming in next year.
Stefano, as this is close to what you were saying, how do you see your own products, fitting into this scheme?
Well, I think, first let me clarify that, of course, what we need to find is a sustainability for all the actors, not just for the payers, not just for developers. And what we are trying to do is to offer a different model, which is not in competition with industry. As said, what we want to focus, where we think that not-for-profit model can have a sense is the very ultra-rare disease where it's really, really difficult to build a business case. So in that sense, I would love to go and discuss with the centralized fund what my price could be. And basically my price is, well, the cost that I have to sustain to keep that product on the market. And then we can also discuss a bit about, all the costs that a developer is paying to the agency, for example, to the European medicine agencies, that are not proportional to the number of patients you treat, to the income you generate, to the nature of the organization, unless you are a small, medium enterprise. And that means that in my case, with 4 patients per year, every patient I have to charge 20 to 30 to 40,000 of regulatory agency fee in the price of that single patient, because there is no reduction, let's say, automatic reduction. So I think we have multiple way to optimize the system, but I definitely think that going to a central authority, to a central fund, will be beneficial. And as Matt said, could be something that in some cases lasts, say, forever. So is where you go. In some cases, might be a way to generate more evidences for the first years on the market, and then you move back to the national payers. But that we definitely need to think a bit outside the box.
Americo, what do you think about it?
I mean, it's very interesting and also fascinating to listen to these potential solutions for ultra-rare diseases. And I think that this can work for this kind of treatments, for these, kind of population that is quite reduced. The financial impact for European countries could be limited. But I think that the real challenge is when you have innovative therapies that can have a significant impact in larger populations. Rare diseases, but also not rare diseases. Because in this case, I think the financial burden is totally different. Let's say the need for these kind of drugs, I think about beta thalassemia, for example, is significantly different from country to country in Europe. Inside the same country is totally different. So this kind of solution, European solution, probably is not so easy to apply. Of course, we have anyway a challenge that is sustainability, and I think there is only in the long term, the only way to to maintain the sustainability again of the public systems of the private sector is to engage very, 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 very early. We need to really detect the needs, of course, at the individual level, but at the population level. And of course, for this kind of engagement, it's crucial to have a European strategy for health, for the drug industry, and probably we need to make this strategy better than in the past. And probably we should be to pay more attention in the way we communicate to the market our strategy and what is the need. Because otherwise, I mean, the game of the sustainability could be in trouble. So early engagement is crucial, and having a clear strategy, a clear definition of the needs, again, not only at the individual, but at community level, is the only way to have the opportunity to maintain sustainability. This is my opinion.
Sorry, if I jump on this, I think clarity of the strategy is really key. Because we have been seeing, the revision of the orphan drug regulation. We're discussing about that revision since many years. And if you're an investor, and you need to invest in an orphan drug disease, you don't know what a frame will be when you will arrive on the market. That's really adding risk to your investment, right? So it may even lead you to say, well, let's just move to the US where the frame is clearer, we know where to go, we can better predict what the cost will be, what the outcome will be, what income will be at the end of the journey. Because in Italy, here in Europe, well, we don't know, they're discussing, they're changing, maybe they will reduce the number of years of market exclusivity. And I'm just talking about rare disease, but that applies, it takes so long.
It's a good example.
Yeah, it's an example, just an example, but
it's a very good one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would just add, though, even in the US, right? I mean, they're talking about value-based pricing. It's 3 or 4 or 5 years away, but it's there. And it's there because of cell and gene therapies. We're right on the radar of payers globally. It's not just about Europe. I've presented at a couple of US conferences, and the 2.5 days were dedicated to value-based pricing. Every single American payer, despite the complexities in the US market with commercial payers and so on, they're talking about value-based pricing because affordability is not just a European issue, it's a global issue for cell and gene therapies. And I would just say to the model that you described, I mean, there's something similar in the UK, right, with the Cancer Drugs Fund and the IMF, which is a pot. But you still end up with the problem of what happens at the end and what price are you going to end up with. So it's not, there's still some complexities there.
You want to add something about your specific model, with Autolus,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've spent almost an hour now moaning about the fact that we don't have a solution. But one of the things that we're doing at Autolus is, and I apologize, it's specifically focused on Germany, is thinking about innovative ways to develop innovative pricing solutions. So as we live in a digital age, we're working with ZS Consulting to have a look at the feasibility of using a platform that they've developed to partner with insurers in Germany through a digital platform to essentially collect real-world evidence and then use that digital real-world evidence collection tool to then have a pricing negotiation or a contracting negotiation with the German, with the GBA. So that's what we're we're doing. It's just at the very early stages, but we have to try something. So I think as we live in the world of digital and AI, we thought, that might be a good collaboration between the two organizations to see if we can come up with some innovative way to enter the German market with our product.
Thanks a lot, Dilip. And I would like to, now we are 5 minutes to the end of this session. I would like to open up to questions if there are any. Otherwise, we have probably another questions internally, but I wanted to check with the audience if anybody wanted. The gentleman on the corner.
Excuse the American accents when I ask this question. Have you seen a model anywhere in the world that's working that actually addresses everybody's needs? Or is the conclusion at the end of the day, no, and that affordability is going to be what's going to really limit access right now?
The only thing that I've seen that's vaguely working is the annuity model. Outside of that, no, is the answer to the question. And I think if you use the Italian example of kind of outcomes-based guarantee program, that's clearly delivered minimal savings and has, instead delivered administrative burdens. So right now, that's all I can think about is the only thing that's working is the annuity scheme. And simple discounts. That works every time. But it's pretty one-sided, and I don't think it's necessarily going to work for the prices that cell and gene therapies will come to the market with. So,
if I might add on that, I think if we only look at the very final mile, so the pricing and reimbursement, it will be very difficult to solve the issues. We should probably start looking at the whole development path, try to make it easier, less expensive, and probably, and I don't want to blame the ladies and the guys that were here this morning from venture capital firms, but also the financial market somehow, until when you expect such a high return from your investment, it will be extremely difficult to end up with a product that is not as expensive, because we know that financial gains in the process of development are a big chunk of what the end price is. So, also looking at different options in terms of capital market to finance the development is something that we should start thinking about. So it's not, we can't solve the problem looking only at the last mile, at the last step.
If I may add very quickly, a positive note on this, the success of these agreements over time have been all the patients that have been treated, in countries like in the UK, in Europe, single countries in Italy, that without these agreements would not have had access to transformative therapies. So that's for sure a success. Then, for sure there is something to improve, but I would say there is also positive there. Chris?
Thanks for the discussion. Richard Wilson from Astellas. It's probably a question that ultimately goes to Americo, but welcome anyone's thoughts here. I don't think I've heard it describe it. Durability, long-term response. If there was one area of the world where we thought, you should see some hope for, really seeing a long-term cure, it would be single-payer systems, and we don't seem to have really been able to get there. Is the concept of a durable long-term care still on the radar, or are we gone beyond that point now? And we're still looking at short-term data being the gate for every therapy.
We have less than 1 minute. Who wants to go for it?
If I can say in general, the concept of durability for us is quite relevant, and in fact, also in the definition of any kind of pricing scheme, we should have in mind, the level of clarity, about the potential value and, the real impact. Because these also affecting the economic balance and sustainability of the treatment.
Yeah, and that was backed up by the white paper. All the interviews that we did, both manufacturer and payer, came to the same conclusion, is they want to see durability, because that then delivers value.
Well, we didn't manage to find a solution to solve the issue, as Dilip noticed. But we know that now that payers trust industry or developers, so that's at least we learned something. I would like really to thank you all for this amazing panel, and also, Americo for being with us and finding a way through his very crowded agenda. And thank you very much for attending.